Let's circle back. You get a call from Ken Goes. He's managing the Pixies.
Mm-hmm.
He has you come out to Boston and meet the band, and the next day you're in the studio
Mm-hmm.
with him. That's how it happened.
Yeah.
How did you end up coming into Ken's purview? Do you have any idea?
I'm fairly certain that he was encouraged to call me by Ivo Watts Russell from 4AD, who was familiar with Big Black, and I think that's probably the long and short of it. I know that Ken Goes and the Pixies were not aware of my band or familiar with me before we met.
Right.
And they were the first band that I had done a session with who weren't already either friends or friends of mine. Like, they were the first people that contacted me out of the blue to do a session with them.
It is funny that you, for doing things the way that you do, the things that people talk about the most with that record is kind of the most producery things that you do, having Kim do the bathroom vocals and the
that ties in with what I was saying before. Like, after I, in the beginning of my tenure as a recording engineer, after I had done a few sessions, I sort of thought I had everything figured out, and everything was an experiment because I didn't really know what I was doing prior to that.
Yeah.
So I think at that stage I was still in the aggressively experimenting stage, but I feel like I was stepping out of my role, which I didn't really comprehend yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this perspective that I have about being more hands-off in the creative decisions on a record, I came to that after getting my fingers burned a few times, and then realizing that it was an obligation of mine not to interfere as much as my ego might have wanted me to at certain points.
Sure.
And that Pixies record was a pretty good lesson in that. Like, I did stuff on their record that I probably had to talk them into, like the bits of conversation and the. I had this conceit at the time that I didn't want to have any dead space on the record. I just wanted each song to flow either into a little vignette or an interlude, or flow into the next song, and that there would be like a continuous experience listening to the record. I don't know why I had that in my head, but that was a notion that I had in my head.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those little things were, those little bridges in between songs, those were in service of that idea of mine, right? And I saddled the band with that idea, and I'm sure I talked them into it, and I'm sure that they, they're agreeable people, so I'm sure that they, went along with it because they wanted to go along, right? Wanted to get along, wanted to go along. And I feel like that was an imposition, and that put a very distinct mark on their record, which they then had to answer for. And I know that they had to answer for it because in every interview,
everyone, sure, yeah,
they would bring it up, and then they would have to say, yeah, that was Steve's idea, know? And I started to feel like the more I realized what I had done, the more I realized how intrusive it was and how wrong it was for me to put my fingerprints on somebody else's records to that degree. And I felt bad that I had interfered. The net effect of it could be, you could pass a value judgment on that being good or bad. That's fine. But on a personal level, I just don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that comes into the room and tells people what to do.
Yeah.